Leeson was also being noticed by those in charge of sending him money. As his losses mounted, he told the usual story. The money was for clients. But the new men had noticed there was something wrong. These clients weren't paying their bills. For the first time, an internal audit was being done, and they told the auditors of the problem. In July, the auditors flew to Singapore. By this time, the secret 5/8 account held losses of more than £100 million.
You have to expect everything to be found. They're supposed to, the nature of an audit is that they're supposed to test information and test documents. Now, if you picked up any document, it had the 5/8 account on it. In some way or form, any document had the 5/8 account on it. So, of course, I'm worried. They come in and they don't test any records. So I can't be happier. They didn't test one record. One report. It's not an audit.
Leeson says that he was convinced he was going to be discovered, and it would have been easy to discover him, and they didn't.
Right.
He portrays himself almost as a passive figure. Do you think that's true?
No. It's only it can only be my speculation about it, of course, but I think he conducted a determined, completely unscrupulous and ultimately extremely successful campaign to avoid discovery through that audit.
Yeah, it's complete amazement, but as you get to know the people at Barings, you can then understand the amazement. A lot of them are just bumbling fools. And that's not me saying that with hindsight. I think if anybody met them, they would get that impression. They come out of some of the reports quite well, because they're allowed to say what they like, and I don't have an opportunity to answer back and make their comments look stupid, which they are.
Well, I think he's a highly intelligent creature with a very highly developed skill in manipulating people around him in a quite extraordinary way. He's like a virus that gets into the workings of something that does work and perverts it utterly. He's an agent of destruction.
The auditors returned to London full of praise for Leeson. They worried about his dual role as both trader and bookkeeper, but they completely failed to spot the most obvious evidence of his fraud. The money being forwarded to Leeson every day was not being repaid to the bank. There were no clients, but the auditors hadn't noticed. Was it Nick, or was it the auditors?
I think it's the auditors in the end. Nick would probably have been clever, probably distracted people, but at the end of the day, there's a job there to be done. It seems to me that they began to associate the commercial success of the organisation somehow or other with the lack of controls. You ran a London investment bank with pristine controls, which you polished regularly. But a global stockbroker was a very different business, and maybe that was a business in which you let it rock and roll a little bit more than you did with the merchant bank, because that was the way that business had been successfully run. The people that were sent in to fix the controls were seduced by the commercial success of the organisation and lost their way.
To the traditional bankers from Barings, the 80s culture they had taken over was strange and alien, but it was one that was making them a great deal of money, far more than they had made as merchant bankers. But what made that money was a willingness to cut corners and cheat customers. It was a culture that Leeson knew well, where extra profits were often skimmed off clients' accounts.
There's a lot of funny stuff that goes on. You see it in the back office. I mean, at Barings, for instance, they have so many different suspense accounts where trades are fed through so that they can book the profits off to different accounts, especially on the futures and options side. That if they looked at those specific accounts, I think that there could be something there that is illegal. some of the charges that I am currently going to be tried on in Singapore, and it's standard practice in the industry.
And who wins out of that?
The company, Bearings.
The audit reassured Leeson's new bosses. He was now seen as a clever trader living the high life in Singapore. But by the autumn of 1994, his secret losses totalled £160 million. And he found himself in a terrible trap. To stop London being suspicious, he had to seem to be making huge profits. In fact, his profits were small. So he did something extraordinary. He used his secret account to buy futures off himself at fantastic prices. By doing this, he was able to fake huge profits. But his hidden losses grew even more.
It was a vicious circle. He kept on having to do irrational things that would lose money on the exchange in order to produce the accounting effect necessary to continue to conceal. And so long as he could continue to get the cash, then it didn't matter whether he did things that were unprofitable, because in his own fantasy world, he was a star. You had almost a psychotic sort of figure toward the end of 1994. On the one hand, the powerful trader supposedly making profits. On the other hand, the reality of the continual loser and having to do irrational things that would lose money.
Leeson was now on a merry-go-round he couldn't get off. Each time he declared more profits, he became more of a star. But in reality, each time he did this, his losses grew. It was an absurd situation, but on the surface he was supremely self-confident. This film, taken at the end of 1994, shows everyone looking anxiously at the screens, except for one man on the right, Nick Leeson, who was now known as the King of the Exchange.
Yeah, it does make you look back and think, obviously I don't know Nick. I thought I did. I thought I knew him really well. Obviously there's a side to Nick that I didn't know. I only knew his colleagues and the friends of ours that worked on the floor, and they only ever fed me with success stories saying how well Nick was doing, what a good trader he was. So I just thought things were fine. The fibs, the lies, that's what makes me angry. Why lie? I'm his wife. I'm his wife. Why should he lie? I mean, I suppose lots of wives think that when they find out their husbands have been having an affair, and they think, well, you know, they've been leading a double life. And that's what it feels like. Not that Nick's had an affair. It feels like Nick was leading a double life.
Leeson was now trapped by his own fake success. It was escalating out of his control. In September, the Singapore Exchange celebrated its 10th anniversary. The guest of honour was Lee Kuan Yew, the country's leader. That night he announced Singapore's own version of the Big Bang, due partly, he said, to Cymex's recent successes.
And now Cymex celebrates its 10th anniversary. 10 years of continuous growth in liquidity.
Everyone knew that the man behind much of this success was the King of the Exchange, Nick Leeson, and Bearings was to receive 2 awards that night.
So it was like a glory day for Bearings. Everybody was so happy and so proud of ourselves. We thought that Nick is the one who's going to receive the prize on the stage, but Nick wouldn't go on stage to receive the award.
I mean, I know it's a lie, but how did I feel? I mean, you know, it's another thing that's increasing the pressure inside me, because it's being opened up to a wider circle, and they're seeing this same image, which I know to be so false, because they weren't true profits. The 5/8 account would have totally wiped out the profits that were being reported.
So you were a fraud?
Correct.
So I don't think he ever really was a trader. I think that was the fantasy. And to keep the fantasy going, he needed 2 things. One was the cash from London, and the other one was the concealment of the losses. So the concealment let him continue to enjoy the fantasy. But when the fantasy broke and he was forced to come back and deal with the fact that he really was a loser, what nourishes and sustains him is his ability to fool people, to be able to be one step ahead, to be able to make them believe in something that's created by him as an illusion.